Five local bus companies seeking fare hikes and, in some cases, increases of up to 50%. China resumes issuing visas for foreigners. And the US, Australia and Britain unveil details of the AUKUS submarine deal. Good evening and welcome to TVB News. Five franchised bus companies in the city are seeking to raise their fares. Kowloon Motor Bus has applied for an increase of nearly 10%, while New World First Bus and Citybus want a rise of $2 for their service routes in the urban area. In addition, Citybus has asked for a 50% increase for rides on its airport buses. Timothy Lee reports.
Last Friday, the Legislative Council's panel on transport discussed fare hike applications filed last year by five franchise bus companies. According to documents provided by the government, Kowloon Motor Bus has asked to raise its fares by 9.5%, while Longwind Bus aims to increase fares by 8.5%. New World First Bus and Citybus's urban services both plan for an all-encompassing $2 rise in fares. Citybus also wants a 50% increase in fares for its airport services and a 23% rise for its regular and overnight services for the airport and North Lantau bus network. Meanwhile, the new Lantau bus has requested a fare increase of almost 10%. If the fare increase suggestions were to be implemented, a ride on the Kowloon Motor Bus 1A route between Sao Mau Ping and Tsim Sha Tsui, for example, would cost $8.30 instead of the current $7.60. The fare for a ride from Appalay Chau to the airport on the Citybus A10 route would go up by more than $20. For passengers traveling between Lei Tung Estate on Appalay Chau and Aberdeen, the fare increase could be close to 65%. Some said they were unhappy about the possible change. This woman noted that this bus is the only transport for her to reach Aberdeen, so there's nothing she can do. She added that the fare rise is just part and parcel of the city's recovering economy. This woman said that everything from bus fares to groceries are getting more expensive around the city, and that she has to be more frugal with her money. The Transport Department noted that in the past 3 years, Hong Kong's franchise buses were severely affected by various factors, including the COVID-19 pandemic, fierce competition with other forms of transport, and rising fuel costs. Authorities stress that they will balance the needs of bus companies and affordability of the proposed changes before making a decision. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
Starting tomorrow, China resumes issuing visas for foreigners, including those for tourism, in a move to further relax regulations for individuals entering the country. Foreigners with visas which were issued before March 28, 2020 and are still within their validity dates will be able to enter China directly. Visa authorities at all ports will also resume issuing visas for those who meet all requirements. Meanwhile, the mainland entered the peak flu season last month. Prices for rapid tests for flu are reportedly 30 times higher than those for rapid antigen tests for COVID, and demand remains high. The United States, Australia and Britain have unveiled details of a plan to provide Australia with nuclear-powered attack submarines. The deal under the so-called AUKUS alliance will cost Australia hundreds of millions of dollars over the next 30 years, with the ultimate aim being for Canberra to have the capacity to build its own submarines. The project is seen as a means of countering China's growing influence in the region. Nasvi Karim reports.
It's been more than 60 years since the United States last shared nuclear propulsion technology for submarines with Britain during the Cold War. On Monday, US President Joe Biden announced a deal involving AUKUS partners Britain and Australia to provide Canberra with nuclear-powered submarines. Biden stood with British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese in San Diego as he announced the project. The 18-month-old alliance was created ostensibly to preserve a free and open Indo-Pacific, but is seen as a counterweight to China's growing military presence in the region.
Today, we're announcing the steps to carry out our first project under AUKUS, developing Australia's conventionally armed nuclear-powered submarine capacity. And I want to be clear, these subs are powered, not nuclear-armed subs. They're nuclear-powered, not nuclear-armed.
The deal is estimated to cost Australia around $245 billion over the next 3 decades, with Albanese saying it would create 20,000 jobs for Australians. It starts with Canberra investing $4 billion over the next 4 years to expand a major submarine base and the country's submarine shipyards. Australia will also buy 3 US Virginia-class nuclear-powered submarines in the early 2030s, with the option of buying 2 more. The latter stages of the project will see Britain and Australia produce and operate a new submarine class, the SSN AUKUS, with British design and cutting-edge US technology.
The AUKUS agreement we confirm here in San Diego represents the biggest single investment in Australia's defence capability in all of our history, strengthening Australia's national security and stability in our region.
While a number of regional countries, including Japan, welcomed the deal, China hit out at the alliance, saying it may lead to a new arms race. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin said the 3 countries are displaying typical Cold War mentality. He added the project involves the transfer of large amounts of weapons-grade uranium from a nuclear weapon state to a non-nuclear weapon state and is against international norms. Nazvi Karim, TVB News.
After unveiling the details of Washington's major submarine deal with Britain and Australia, US President Joe Biden said he expected to speak to Chinese President Xi Jinping soon. Meanwhile, the British government published an update to its foreign policy framework, which saw a significant hardening of its stance towards China and Russia. Daniel Rao tells us more.
In a meeting in San Diego, California, US President Joe Biden and British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak outlined the need to engage China and maintain dialogue, but noted what they called the challenge posed by the increasing assertiveness of the Chinese Communist Party. They also discussed the necessity of remaining steadfast in support of Ukraine as it fends off Russia's invasion. With the US, UK and Australia having unveiled details of their major submarine deal, Biden said he expected to soon speak to Chinese President Xi Jinping, but declined to give a precise time frame for when the dialogue could take place. Biden said in mid-February he expected to speak to Xi about what Washington claimed was a Chinese spy balloon that flew through American airspace. However, no such call has been announced as of yet. Biden also told the press that he was not worried that China would see the AUKUS submarine deal as aggression. Addressing the prospective discussion between President Xi and Biden, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin said China and the United States are maintaining necessary communications. He added Beijing believes the value and significance of communication is to enhance understanding and manage differences. Meanwhile, the British government published an update to its foreign policy framework as Prime Minister Rishi Sunak pledged to increase military funding by £5 billion over the next 2 years.
Why are we doing that? We're doing it because the world has become more volatile, the threats to our security have increased, and it's right that we as a government, me as Prime Minister, invest appropriately to keep us safe.
The UK's Integrated Review, or IR, said China under the Chinese Communist Party poses an epoch-defining and systematic challenge with implications for almost every area of government policy. Still, the IR said its preference was for better cooperation and understanding with China. The IR also outlines that Russia still remains the most acute threat to the UK as the conflict in Ukraine rages on. Daniel Rell, TVB News.
Iran said on Monday that the country's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, has pardoned around 22,000 people who were arrested during recent anti-government protests. The statement by Iran's judiciary head, Ghola Hossein Ejahi, offered a glimpse of the full scope of the number of people arrested during the demonstrations. He said almost 83,000 prisoners and those facing charges had so far been pardoned. Of those, some 22,000 had been arrested, while none of those pardoned had committed theft or violent crimes. Iranians took to the streets after the September death of Mahsa Amini. The 22-year-old student died while in custody of Iran's morality police after being arrested for breaking the country's dress code. Still ahead on tonight's news. The BBC reinstates football presenter Gary Lineker. In the US, more depositors line up to withdraw their saving from collapsed Silicon Valley Bank. And Macau police say the victim in Sunday's murder case was a sex worker. Welcome back to TVB News. The British Broadcasting Corporation has reinstated football presenter Gary Lineker and will set up an independent review of social media use by its personnel. The ex-England captain was suspended by the BBC after a controversial Twitter post last week. A mass walkout of sports staff in support of Lineker disrupted schedules. David Garrett reports.
The presenter of the BBC's flagship sports show Match of the Day, once again, Gary Lineker has been the story of the week in the UK. Instead of producing the news, the BBC itself was the news. The ex-player was suspended because the corporation said his tweet broke impartiality guidelines, but after programming disruption, he's now reinstated.
I've already said what I'm going to say on Twitter. If I say anything more now, it just encourages people to doorstep me.
Lineker posted that the previous few days had been surreal. He thanked his sports colleagues. He stated his pride at working with the BBC, which he called the fairest broadcaster. The 62-year-old wrote he can't wait to get back to work. He went on to reiterate his stance on small boats, saying his recent troubles do not compare to having to flee persecution or war. Lineker had criticised the Conservative government's latest migrant plan. It is a divisive subject. Some think Britain make it too easy for crossings, while others, like Lineker, feel the UK does not do enough to support asylum seekers. As a recognised face of the organisation, Lineker and the BBC were accused of political bias. So the corporation announced he was stepping back. However, other freelance sports journalists also using social media walked out in solidarity, causing programming chaos.
I think I've acted in the right way through this. It's always been difficult. As everyone's been saying on this affair, there's been no easy answers. It's been tough to get the balance right. But asking Gary Lineker to step aside, I think, was appropriate at that moment. Then we reset and we do the things we've laid out in this agreement.
The publicly funded broadcaster said there would be an independent review of its social media rules. Neither party has publicly apologised. The BBC did say sorry to viewers. Lineker will be back on TV screens on Saturday. David Garrett, TVB News.
Depositors withdrew savings and investors broadly sold off bank shares as the U.S. federal government raced to reassure Americans that the country's banking system was secure. This after the second and third largest bank failures in U.S. history occurred in the span of just 48 hours. Regulators guaranteed all deposits at the collapsed Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank, respectively. That's in addition to creating a program that effectively threw a lifeline to other banks to shield them from a run on deposits. U.S. President Joe Biden insisted that the banking system is safe, telling the public their deposits will be there when they need them. Biden also said the banking executives responsible for the failures will be held accountable. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve will reassess its supervision of Silicon Valley Bank. Elsewhere, Pascal Donohoe, chairman of Eurozone finance ministers, said banks in the bloc have no exposure to Silicon Valley Bank and remain in good shape. Macau authorities, after further investigations into a hotel murder case, said today the female victim was a sex worker. They also revealed that a Hong Kong male suspect had confessed to the killing and he has been charged with murder and theft. Macau police said the 46-year-old victim was found at the Pension Florida Hotel on Sunday. She had stayed in a room there since mid-February. Authorities noted the 45-year-old Hong Kong male suspect claimed he was angered when the victim insulted him. He allegedly hit the victim's head with a hard object several times. The police are still investigating the case and said the man had no previous criminal records. Chief Executive John Lee and several senior Hong Kong officials today started visiting central government departments in Beijing. Lee will remain in Beijing until Saturday. The CE visited the Ministry of Finance this morning and met with Finance Minister Liu Kun. John Lee was accompanied by Secretary for Constitutional and Mainland Affairs Eric Tsang and Financial Services and Treasury Chief Christopher Ho. Liu Kun noted President Xi Jinping has spoken highly of John Lee and wants to learn from the city's chief executive. Lee meanwhile thanked the Ministry of Finance and the central government for supporting the SAR's status as a global financial hub. The leader of the city's ice hockey team in Bosnia, where a protest-related song was played instead of the Chinese national anthem, today gave her side of the story. Annie Kwan said the event organizer was unable to download the correct anthem from the link provided by the Sports Federation and Olympic Committee of Hong Kong, China. Relevant penalties will reportedly be handed out in the next few days. It all dates back to 2 weeks ago when Hong Kong's ice hockey team defeated Iran in Bosnia. A song related to anti-government protests was played instead of the Chinese national anthem. According to a report submitted by the Sports Federation and Olympic Committee of Hong Kong, China, or SF&OC, the Hong Kong Ice Hockey Association did not state clearly whether it had provided the event organizer with the correct version of the anthem. The team leader in question, Annie Kwan, wrote in a statement today that she did send an email with the correct link for the Chinese national anthem to the International Hockey Federation in December. On the same night, the federation confirmed it received the song and forwarded the link to the Bosnia Ice Hockey Federation. Kwan also stressed it had verbally asked the Bosnian organizer to verify the anthem, but the organizer never made time for it. She added that while the link provided by SF&OC is attached to the accurate anthem, the details are all in Chinese. Choosing English would lead to a different layout, which is why the organizer were unable to download the song. That, however, was not relayed to the SAR authorities, prompting the organizer to search online, resulting in the incident. Kwan added she's too busy as team leader and may not have had the time to make sure the right song would be played. Police sources say Kwan has already finished giving her statements detailing what had happened. Officers say so far they have not identified the case as having any connections with anti-government individuals. It's also believed SF&OC has been discussing with the government a feasible and suitable penalty for the Hong Kong Ice Hockey Association, and that results will be out soon. Meanwhile, the International Hockey Federation has not submitted its report to the SAR accordingly. Responding to media inquiries, Secretary for Innovation, Technology and Industry Sun Dong said authorities again met Google's Asia-Pacific management in January and believe the search results have improved. We tried looking up Hong Kong national anthem on Google, but protest-related contents continue to remain high up in the search results. Lawmaker Dominic Lee said the tech giant apparently has not been cooperative and suggests the SAR authorities handle the situation by legal means. The government will distribute $3,000 from the first batch of the consumption vouchers on April 16th, but there are concerns that some elderly residents may have problems if they change the facility used for collecting the money. That's because many senior citizens have switched to using Joy U cards, with some having to re-register for the vouchers. They need to change their Octopus card details on the consumption voucher website. They are required to input numbers for their Hong Kong ID, mobile phone, as well as their new Joy U card. Users can also phone the hotline 2969-5588. Changes need to be made on or before the 29th of this month to receive the vouchers on April the 16th. Lawmaker Gary Lineker said there has been an influx of inquiries from the elderly regarding the process, saying it is too complicated. The Home and Youth Affairs Bureau has approved the first hotel-turned-youth hostel under a special project. Jointly introduced by the Hong Kong Federation of Youth Groups and Gale Well Group Limited, the hostel on Morrison Hill Road in Causeway Bay has 97 rooms. It will provide support for its youth tenants in areas including career planning. In his policy address, Chief Executive John Lee proposed the idea of subsidizing NGOs to convert hotels and inns into youth hostels. The aim is to make more than 3,000 additional beds available for eligible young people over the next 5 years. And that's the news. Thanks for watching.